Órale, bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. Hey, we are 32 for 32. Back in June, we started this Insider series, and I got to tell you, as our guest, as I was telling him right before, I thought I'd be done with this in a month and a half, but it's taken almost 3 months to do it. But hey, you know what? We are here, and our closer for this series. I'm not going to play Enter the Sandman because that's Yankees, and there's a little bit of a rivalry between the Northeast and New York City, but. Joining us today, Ian Glendon of Full Press Coverage. He is the editor-in-chief. He is the site owner. He also has within there Full Press Patriots, so it's one of his favorite shows. Ian, I'm so glad you joined us. I'm so glad you get to help us close out this incredible series. Bienvenido. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for having the foresight not to play. As much as I love that song, I don't want to be affiliated with. The only Yankee that I actually don't mind, but still, it would hurt to come out to that.
Oh, I gotta tell you. Well, I have to tell you later on after the show. If you got any questions about Nomar Garciaparra, I got to know him a little bit in my Dodger days. But just a preview, absolutely fantastic guy, just absolutely peach of a person.
Yeah, I had a number of his jerseys when I was a kid, so I was a big fan.
Oh, number five, and you got to wear number 5 at the Dodgers, so it was awesome. So we're talking about the Patriots here. And they were one of the most intriguing stories of all training camp. And it just so happened that it worked out that we're doing this interview now because I think we talked about this over a week ago. This would have been a much different interview a week ago than it is today. It is the Mac Jones era. And there was the surprising cut on this past Tuesday. We're recording this on Friday morning in early September, the 3rd. First off, how surprised were you at the Cam Newton cut? And then number 2, what is kind of like the outlook for Mac Jones, his strengths, what they're kind of leaning into, and what they saw that's coming up for this season?
Well, I think initially I was shocked because, if we would have done this interview last week, I would have probably said that Cam was going to be the starter. So fortunately we didn't because, well, it would have made me look wrong, in which case I would have been. But, having a moment to think about it and realizing, that, Mac had a really strong preseason. It doesn't mean Cam played poorly. I thought Cam was actually going to have a far better season this year. But I think it came down to this. It's once you go to Mac, you're not going to go back to Cam. The situation that Cam is in, his status as a former first overall pick, and that's not the only reason. But his age, the fact that, he's not going to get a chance to really play, whether Mac plays well or not here. So, like, if they put Mac Jones in and he struggles for a couple weeks, Bill Belichick's not going to pull the plug just like that and start going back and forth between quarterbacks because you risk losing Mac Jones, not just for this year, but beyond. So once that decision was made, it didn't make sense to have Cam on the roster. And I think in a bit of a show of respect or show of gratitude, Bill Belichick probably brought this up to him, said, hey, look, we're going to end up going with the kid. We can release you, gives him an opportunity to go play elsewhere. And I think that was really the reason why. I know some people, and we talked about this a little bit before we got on, some people suggested it was the COVID vaccination. That's not the case. Again, this was just a situation where Mac Jones really, I don't want to say exceeded expectations, but he put a lot of good stuff on film. And what was happening in training camp, what he was doing in training camp, translated on the field, which is a very important thing. Because, you can do one thing in training camp and practice situations, but, once you get into game situations, if you start to struggle, you need a little bit more work. But the positives were Mac, his poise, his quick decision-making, his just quick release, all that was on display during the 3 preseason games. And, by all accounts, he was one of the better, if not the best rookie signal caller of the group through those 3 games. So Bill made a decision, and it's like you said, it's the Mac Jones era, whether Cam fans like it or not, or whoever, Patriots fans, whoever. It's the kid's turn to go, and it's going to have every opportunity to do so and to succeed.
How much, I think one of the deceiving thoughts about the Patriots is that they were, for this season, that they were going to run. How do you see the kind of like the differential between the run and the pass, and where do you see Mac Jones' strengths when it comes to the passing game?
Well, I already mentioned a little bit his poise and his quick release. That's something that, anyone who watched Tom Brady for years, and now I'll say it right now, I'm not comparing Mac to Tom. There's no other Tom Brady, and I'm willing to bet that that's going to be the case for quite some time. But he does share a lot of the same qualities and style when it comes to, okay, here's a guy that's obviously not he's not the most fleet of foot, which we know that isn't necessarily the most important thing as a quarterback, but he seems to control the offense in the tempo like a veteran and not a rookie. And I think that's the most noticeable thing from Mac and from how the players speak about him. Because, I think if you have Cam Newton in, whether or not he can throw the ball well or not doesn't matter. It does matter, but when it comes to running, he's such a dynamic runner. We saw it even as the Patriots struggled last year, how good he was in the run game and what he brought to this Patriots run game. I mean, he set records for quarterback, obviously. But it was more his style of play and his advantage that would dictate that, maybe the Patriots ran the ball a little bit more. With Mac, you want him making decisions. And, if you think he's the guy who's going to be the guy for 10 plus years, you want to make sure that he's learning how to make those decisions early on. So I think you're going to see a nice mix of everything. Fortunately for Mac Jones, he's in a lot better situation than Cam Newton was a year ago, because the Patriots, obviously they've upgraded their wide receivers. They've added the 2 tight ends, but they might have the best collection of running backs in the entire league. Not the best, like individually, but as a whole, as an entire unit, I think they might have the best group, and that's going to help Mac tremendously because they can all do something a little bit differently. And that's going to be fits for defensive coordinators to try to figure out.
Well, let's get into those running backs. We talked about, you mentioned it, Damian Harris looking like the presumptive lead ball carrier, but Ramondre Stevenson obviously looked great in preseason. James White has an incredible history with as a pass catcher, and JJ Taylor really showed out. Can you kind of break down how the touches are gonna be split up between these guys?
The only thing I could probably say for certain is you're right. Damian Harris is going to be the quote unquote lead back, but for anyone who's ever played fantasy football for the last 15 to 20 years, there's nothing more maddening than trying to figure out what the Patriots are going to do with their running backs. And look, that's a great thing for them because it keeps defensive coordinators guessing too. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot of this year. So, like I mentioned, all these guys can do something a little bit different really well. So, James White is that wise veteran, he's going to catch 95% of the things that are thrown to him, probably 99% of the things that are thrown to him. But it doesn't mean he can't run and do all the smart things that a veteran does. Damian Harris is just your, typical, big horse of a running back who can run, who can catch, that type of thing. And then you have a guy like Stevenson who looks like the second coming of LeGarrette Blount. And yeah, LeGarrette Blount didn't have that long of a career, but when he was really good with the Patriots, he was really, really good. So, it's going to be interesting how they deploy these players and what packages, because again, preseason is one thing. You're getting such a bare bones view of what the offense is going to be that I think we're going to really learn a lot this first week and see how these touches are distributed. But that's not a certainty though, because they could go, Damian Harris heavy week 1. And then all of a sudden it's JJ Taylor and Ramondre Stevenson, or maybe it's a big James White, against the Buccaneers type game where it's like, okay, Tom Brady's probably going to come in and put up some points, you're going to have to keep up. Well, that means you're going to have more pass catching running back plays designed. So it's going to be fun as a fan and as someone who watches this team to see all these talented running backs get different opportunities to do different things. But that also means the only certainty we know is that Damian Harris right now is the starting running back, and by all accounts, he's done everything. He's hit every marker in the progression chart, the theoretical progression chart for a running back that he can. So he earned this spot. Obviously, Sony Michel getting traded really, solidified that. But yeah, it's honestly, it's fun to watch. That's why covering this team is never a dull moment because, again, it's never the same thing every week.
It is incredible. And what's funny? I almost feel like the 49ers, the Patriots, and to a certain extent, the 49ers have kind of almost become the blueprint for so many other teams to not have the traditional, one guy, a Derrick Henry type who's the guy you give the ball 90% of the time to. It's, it's kind of splitting everything up, trying to keep guys healthy. I think it's really interesting how many teams are doing this more. The Buccaneers are another team. The Browns seem to be taking it to a new level, but so many teams are just going away from relying on that one running back. And it's I do kind of, as you said, it's maddening, but I kind of feel like a lot of the genesis came from the Patriots.
Yeah, and look, part of it was out of necessity. You have a team in the early 2000s where, the running game was still a pretty prominent part of the whole NFL. I mean, it's certainly shifted away from those one-back teams to now a lot of teams, like you said, have multi-use running backs. Early on in the Patriots dynasty, it was, Antoine Smith for a couple of years. They had Corey Dillon running the rock. But then, the rule changes started to really make an impact on offense where, things were much more open. All of a sudden, you were looking at situations that weren't necessarily there before, i.e. maybe running backs in the, being able to get a little bit smaller because they didn't have to be big enough and rely, on, no more fullback, no more big running back to add extra protection. Like there was enough protection. The offenses were opening up. All of a sudden, you're finding guys like the CJ Spillers of the world and all those like little scat running backs all of a sudden were making a big impact because they could catch the ball in open field. Well, once you get the ball in open field, if you're a linebacker, it's pretty tough to chase down a pretty fast running back. I mean, just it's physics, it's size, first agility, all that stuff. So, I think you started to see that evolution when, I mean, the quarterback's always been the most important position, but over the last 15 years, we've just seen such a drastic shift to rules that just benefit the offenses that have really, gotten us to the point where, in 1999, the average passer rating was 78. Whereas in 2018, it was 95, which, again, that's a pretty dramatic jump. And for a stat that is just, pretty bare bones just for passing, but it also speaks to how different players are being used. So now you're not now you're not running the ball 25, 30 times. Maybe you're running it 15 to 20 and then using the running backs as pass catchers for another 10, so the distribution is starting to, you're seeing that a lot more across teams. I think Derrick Henry is more of a unicorn now than something of a norm, which 15, 20 years ago, he would have been the norm because you got him, say guys like Sean Alexander, Adrian Peterson came around in the early 2000s or mid 2000s and so on and so forth. But that's a dying breed in that type of position. And in the way that things going now, there's no way that they're going to go back to a one back system. It's just too many athletes, too many different ways of running offense. And you're going to need everyone you got.
Yeah, and I know it becomes more cost effective to do it that way too. Just paying 4 guys, 3-4 guys a little, and instead of one guy a lot.
And real quick, and that probably played into part of how the Patriots acted, because that's what they always went for across the board. Anyways, was where can we distribute? How much value can we get instead of paying one guy, X amount of dollars? We're going to pay 3 or 4 guys that are going to do similar things and try to fill that gap. And the same thing with running backs, wide receivers, defensive players, cornerbacks, especially during a nice stretch of 10 years where they didn't, win a Super Bowl or whatever. But that's just that's the philosophy that Bill Belichick has always had. And I think we've seen that play out a little bit here as well. somewhat, but although a little differently because they did spend some money this offseason.
Well, before we get into where significant money was spent, let's start with the wide receivers. And we got the free agent coming in, Nelson Agholor, who had kind of like a resurgent season with the Raiders last year. You also had Jakobi Meyers, who flashed a few times, even though last year, because even though the team was fairly run oriented. Now that there's more of a traditional pocket passer in there, how do the targets look like they're going to be split between the two of them?
Well, Jakobi Meyers is a guy I talk about Damian Harris kind of hitting all those check marks when it comes to progression or whatever. Jakobi Meyers has been that guy too. He was during that 2019 season, Tom Brady's last in New England. It was a tough go of things, especially towards the second half of the season where the team obviously lost several players. I mean, at one point there's a photo of Tom Brady sitting on the bench with Antonio Brown, Josh Gordon, and Julian Edelman. And at one point in that season, none of them were left on the field because, Edelman got hurt, and then Gordon and Brown obviously didn't make it. I mean, Brown didn't make it past that one game. So towards the end of the year, it was N'Keal Harry, a rookie, who came in off the PUP list, and Jakobi Meyers. And at one point, it was just two of them carrying the load for wide receivers. And you saw flashes of just playmaking ability, smart route running, great hands, and just an instinct, something that not every receiver has. Like a lot of receivers, especially coming out of college into the pros, they're relying a lot on athleticism and their God-given talent. Well, when you get to the NFL, you have to refine that talent. You got to make sure that you're smarter than the guy you're going up against. How are you going to get around him? It's not just speed. It's not just, whatever. And Jakobi Meyers seems to have gotten that. So he seems to understand the game. He knows how to, read players to a certain level that he's, only 3 years in the league. But I see a lot of good things for him in this offense. And part of that, too, is the addition of Nelson Agholor. Agholor's deep threat ability should open this offense up quite a bit. I mean, his average, I think, was 18. Off the top of my head, I think it was 18.7, his yards per catch last year, somewhere in that range, which was, I mean, the Patriots haven't had a guy like that in 3 or 4 years since Brandon Cooks was averaging right around there, and I don't even think it was that high. So the Patriots have really lacked that type of player in this offense. Now, is it necessary to win? No, but when you have a team that, you having a rookie quarterback, you want to give him options at every level. That means Nelson Agholor, that means Jakobi Meyers, Kendrick Bourne, and it means the two tight ends, which, I mean, the 5 of those players just in general, and we're not even talking about the running backs, pretty much cover the entire depth of the field for Mac Jones. So he's going to have options at every level, assuming they all stay healthy.
How about the tight ends? So you touched on the tight ends a couple of times. Jonnu Smith coming over from Tennessee, Hunter Henry coming over from the Chargers. Both are pretty well known as well above average pass catchers at a position where it's tough to get good ball players. They're also well known as good run blockers. So I think it's too much to expect that they're gonna. I know people started to talk about when Gronk and Aaron Hernandez that time. I think that's way too high of expectations. But where do these two kind of appear on the pecking order for targets when it comes to the Patriots?
They're gonna be high because the Patriots. You talk about we talk about the 49ers and the Patriots kind of being trendsetters. Well, the Patriots were the two tight end formation trendsetters a long time ago. They tried doing this to some extent with guys like Daniel Graham and Christian Fourier early in the dynasty. You saw them essentially during the last couple Super Bowls. And then obviously you mentioned, excuse me, Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. And unfortunately for those two, Gronk couldn't stay healthy. And, we obviously all know what happened with Aaron Hernandez, but even from that point on, you saw guys like Scott Chandler come in to try to, give them a 2 tight end set. And then it was, Martellus Bennett. And again, unfortunately, health prevented those two from being on the field at the same time. But, 2 tight ends in that position in general is of such a importance to Bill Belichick and the teams that he puts together. And I think they've gotten two. They have two of the very best. Is it Travis Kelce and Rob Gronkowski? No, but Jonnu Smith, and we saw this in the very first preseason game. That guy can run for a big tight end like he is. You give him the ball in open field, man. He is going to get you some serious yards after the catch, and that's something that the Patriots offense has sorely missed. I mean, I think a year ago they had maybe 27 total receptions from the tight end position, which is absurdly low. I mean, they barely broke 300 yards. So I expect both of them to have, again, assuming health. I expect both of them to have really big seasons and be like a huge focal point of the offense, to the point where maybe, at the end of the year, we're looking at this and saying, well, it's maybe it's Jakobi Meyers, and then your next two best receivers are the two tight ends. And that would not shock me at all, because, well, what's easier than throwing to a big tight end up the middle? Nothing really. I mean, maybe throwing to the running back, but you can create a lot of mismatches with talented tight ends to the point where it's going to make life a lot easier for Mac Jones.
So, one receiver that I didn't touch on earlier was N'Keal Harry, starting the year on the PUP list. Obviously, this is a guy with first-round pedigree. He's someone who had high expectations and hasn't lived up to them to this point. Starting the year injured. I mean, how much concern is it that that great expectation was just too high, and maybe it's not going to happen for him in New England?
I mean, there's certainly some concern. I mean, obviously he, he requested a trade early in the offseason. Belichick didn't comply, and, things seemed to settle down, and he was actually having a pretty solid camp. Now, we've said this about N'Keal Harry before, where he's played well in practice, and, it just hasn't translated to in-game ability. But, this is just another setback, because now he's, at least he's going to miss at least the first 6 weeks. By that time, I mean, who knows whether the opportunity is going to be there or not for him once he gets back, because, if those top three receivers, the Kendrick Bourne, Jakobi Meyers, and of course, Nelson Agholor, if they're playing well, guess what? They're going to get the majority of the snaps. And then all of a sudden you got the tight ends and the running back. So, where's N'Keal Harry going to fit in? Well, he's going to get a handful of snaps here and there. And in his case, he'll have to make the most of every single one of them. And, can he do that? I got to lean towards probably not. I mean, I just haven't seen the consistency, at least enough to sit there and say for sure he's going to turn it around this year. I mean, he still has to prove it on the field. He can do whatever he wants in preseason and whatever he wants during training camp and practices. But until he does it on the field regularly and consistently, it's going to be tough to count on him. And I think, for him, this is it for the Patriots. I don't think he'll be here next year if he doesn't make an impact when he returns.
Let's get in the offensive line. I always love to ask the question, because those big guys at the front really make football happen. The Patriots are going in with a very strong unit, rated number 3 by Pro Football Focus going into the season. What is through injuries and everything through the preseason, is this still looking like one of the strengths of the team?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were able to obviously bring back a guy like Trent Brown, who, had a little brief stint over in Oakland/Las Vegas. I think it was strictly just Las. I can't remember if he came over right before they moved over. The last couple of years, the timing of everything is a little bit of a blur. But adding Trent Brown, who's just a beast of a human being, back to this unit, having guys like David Andrews in there, this is always going to be a strength of the Patriots. Even when they didn't have the most talent, they were able to play well. Now, a lot of that has to do with the quarterback. I mean, for years they were playing behind or in front of Tom Brady, who makes life for an offensive lineman a whole hell of a lot easier than, say, a guy, I don't know, someone who's not as good as Tom Brady, let's say. I don't want to get into if I said Patrick Mahomes, that might ruffle some feathers. But the point is, there's a lot that the quarterback can do to help their offensive line. And going back to some of the qualities that we talked about with Mac Jones, he shares a lot of those same qualities. So quick release, quick decision making. That obviously, the less time an offensive lineman has to engage in either pass or run blocking, the better, because you would assume once that's over, their job's done because the ball's out and that's what it is. But it helps that they have a lot of talent and some pretty good depth on that line as well. And like I said, it starts with center David Andrews. They lost Joe Thuney in the offseason, which, that can't go understated because the guy, didn't miss a snap for the team for 5 years. But when it comes down to it, this is a good group to protect Mac Jones. And does it have some flaws? Yeah, sure. Does Isaiah Wynn, does he have a good season? Who knows? I mean, he's shown a lot of promise for being a first round draft pick. And I would hope that, again, this next season is going to really have him blossom into an elite pass blocker. But I think they're going to get a lot of help from the quarterback and the running backs in particular, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity to get rid of the ball quickly. And when they don't, they have the talent and the size and the ability to kind of hopefully keep Mac Jones upright. We don't want to start seeing him turn into Drew Bledsoe and get stationary in the pocket and just take a lot of sacks. We don't want that.
No. Well, let's go to the other side of the ball. I always love to ask the question about the defense. Last year, the Patriots are kind of a little more giving when it came to the running game. And I know there was some investment on that side of the ball. Where does that unit kind of stand against the run, against the pass, and kind of how much does Stephon Gilmore starting the year on the PUP list kind of really hurt them?
It's definitely going to hurt them, especially because they have to play the Bucs in week 4. And that is going to be a game that, Mac is probably going to have to play the game of his life, and it might not even matter because I think the Buccaneers are that good. But missing Stephon Gilmore is going to hurt because this secondary unit is good. JC Jackson is good. I mean, there's a lot of talent in this unit, but without Stephon Gilmore, you go from an elite unit to a pretty good one, and one that is susceptible to maybe keep being, beat up a little bit. But on the flip side, the good thing for them is their front seven is night and day from what it was a year ago. I mean, adding a guy like Matthew Judon, who just looks like an absolute perfect fit for this team. Not only his mentality off the field, but the way he plays on the field. Chase Winovich coming back healthier now and going into a third year, watching him develop. Dante Hightower being back in the mix after missing a year, bringing back guys like Lawrence Guy and signing Devin Godchow and all that. All of a sudden, you have a defensive front seven that's really deep and really talented, and you're going to see them. I think you're really going to see them carry the load, especially early on in the season, because I think you're going to see them try to make up for maybe taking a step back in the secondary, which has been the Patriots' strength really for the last 4 or 5 years, is that secondary. So I think we've seen a shift a little bit, but that's really mainly because of Stephon Gilmore being out. For, at least 6 weeks or however long it ultimately ends up being. But at the end of the day, I think this defensive unit, especially early on, is going to be tough to run against. But if you get enough time, you're probably going to be able to pass on this team. And until Stephon Gilmore gets back, it's going to be tough for me to sit there and say they're going to be a lockdown unit in the secondary.
Awesome. Ian, I can't tell you thank you. I mean, we finished strong. We definitely finished strong in this great series, and so I'm also asking to finish strong with what's always been consistently been one of the favorite questions that's asked. This being a Latino-focused podcast, my family, my heritage being Mexican, and Mexican food being such a big part of our culture. Favorite Mexican food, but also specifically, what are some of your favorite taco types?
Well, I'm a soft taco type of guy because I love burritos. I feel like you actually appreciate the innards of it more. Plus, you're always rolling the dice with a hard shell. Sometimes it's stale, sometimes it's just not quite the corn flavor that you want. Maybe it's again, it's a poor brand. You don't want to mix that up. Get yourself a nice homemade tortilla, fresh out of the oven. You got it's not thick. It's not that store-bought white flour junk. where you get it and it's like a 1/4 inch thick and you can taste the flour. I'm talking like that very strong, really just quality tortilla, some great rice, some great bean. That's all you really need. You don't have to do it too much. Add a little bit of meat to it, some hot sauce, very key. Hotter the better, by the way.
Oh, yes.
That's that's how I do it. And then again, if you have like I said, the rice is a big thing for me. I like rice. I like beef. I do like chicken too. Like get some shredded marinated chicken with some spices and stuff in there. See, I'm about to go get something to eat right now. It's almost lunchtime. Actually, it doesn't matter what time it is right now. I would go and eat something right now after this conversation.
Oh man. Well, it's a little bit earlier for me out on the West Coast, but yeah, I'm already thinking about lunch myself. So, Ian, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Un millón de gracias. Esto fue un gran placer. This was fantastic. I just want to make sure. I know you got a lot of stuff that you're putting out. Please feel free to let our Familia community know where they can find all your great work.
Well, most importantly, and I'll keep it brief, head over to fullpresscoverage.com, because not only obviously can you get great Patriot stuff, but there's a lot of really hardworking people over there, and their work is worth reading. So I would definitely check that out. And if you want to give me a follow on Twitter, I talk a lot of quarterbacks. So if you like that, you can definitely tune in. It's at IGLEN31.
Oh man, awesome. Yeah, give him a follow. He's yeah. Hey, you know what? Who's more important than the quarterback when it comes to the NFL? So
that's what I'm trying to tell people. That's all,
Gotta love it, and we're gonna see it this year with the Patriots. Man, I think when it comes to Mac Jones, it's gonna be maybe he's not gonna be a starter on a fantasy team, but I think especially the teams that have two quarterbacks, I think by probably the middle of the season, he's gonna work his way into a starting gig as the second quarterback on a team. But familia, eso es todo for our show, and eso es todo for our Insider Series. We went 32 for 32, and we beat the deadline by a week of the season, almost a week, 6 days. So muchas gracias everybody for joining us. Please also muchas gracias to Anchor, who put our audio podcast out on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Also thanks to YouTube for bringing our faces and putting our faces out there. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you get us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you give us a review or give us a like, hey, we would say muchas gracias. Also, you can find original content at familiaffp.com, and you can find me, Jorge Martin 17, on Twitter, and also on Twitter and Instagram, you can find our at Familia FFP page. Otra vez. Also, today we're on Facebook Live, so please give us a like there. Otra vez, Ian, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. And everybody, remember, have a happy and safe Labor Day weekend. And make sure you're kicking butt on your drafts, because we know that so many of our drafts are happening this weekend. And always remember, todos somos familia. Salud.